Hello, happy Saturday. How's your weekend going? How's your Saturday going? I hope you're having a very chilled and laid back weekend, free from work, free from stress, just you and family, fun, vibes. I wish, right? Anyways, you remember last week's episode, we spoke about prioritizing our wellness, and I hope you've been able to identify your ideal me time. It was very hard for me to actually prepare for today's episode. Normally, before recording my episodes, I try to organize my thoughts, but for this particular episode, it was a bit challenging for me to do that. I was blank for a long period of time. I was just blank. I did not have an idea of what to write. At some point, I was considering just changing the topic and, just looking for something else I could talk about. But you know what? I realized I was having this mental block because I was holding back. For me to talk about being vulnerable, I had to actually be vulnerable. I know this is where the question popped up, how vulnerable am I ready to be with my listeners? And I answered myself immediately. I mean, you all are my friends. You're so precious to me, and I would do anything for my listeners. Yeah, so last week's episode, I mentioned that I find talking really therapeutic. I find it really calming for me. And I think I'm this way because half the time, or 80% of the time I talk about my problems, a solution would come. Either the solution comes from the conversation I'm having with the person, or the solution comes from the person I'm having a conversation with, or the solution will just come somehow from sharing. There's this thing they say a problem shared is half solved. For me, most times, when I share my problems, I get a solution. So I think that was what made me embrace talking about my problems. The funny thing is, when I don't talk, if I have something bugging me and I don't talk about it, I feel like I'm carrying this heavy weight in my mind. It's I don't like bottling up my feelings, I don't like bottling up my emotions, and I would refer to myself as an open book. Only a few will be given the privilege to read this open book. There was even a day that a friend had to tell me that she feels I share too much with people that I'm comfortable with. I tend to just share things with them, and she's scared I'll get hurt by the people I trust someday. And that day I said I would share things with people I trust, and if they turn around to hurt me, I don't know, I can't control the actions of others, so I'll just say it's on them, not me. Probably was just meant to happen, and we'll make do with the pieces of what we have left. You would wonder why I'm talking about my art of talking and my ability to just talk about my problems. It's because preparing for this topic actually made me reflect. It made me reflect on the kind of personality I have, and I'm a kind of person that shares a lot, but I was not always like this. I was not always this person that just wants to talk about our problems. I was not always this person that is not afraid to talk about our flaws, to seek constructive criticism. I was not always like this. And thinking about my life, thinking about my journey so far, growing up, I wasn't that person that loved talking about things. I just wanted to move unnoticed. That was the kind of life I lived for a very long time. I avoided confrontations. I did not want any feedback. I was scared of people pointing out my flaws. So I just wanted to just be unseen. I just wanted to be in the shadows. And I wasn't the kind of person that would talk to my friends about my challenges, about my problems. I was bottling up a lot of things. I was bottling up my emotions. I was bottling up my anger, my insecurities. I was bottling up a whole lot of things. And I just ended up internalizing so much pain, so much hurt, so much negativity. And these things affected my self-confidence. Along the line, I started embracing vulnerability. But I was embracing it. I was embracing it because I was scared of being vulnerable. Hear me out. It started with me talking about my flaws openly. I'll talk about my flaws openly. I'll talk about my shortcomings openly. Because I believe that by acknowledging them, I am taking the power away from somebody else to use them against me. I was trying to be outspoken about my problems, about my shortcomings, about my insecurities, because I was just too scared. I did not want somebody else to use it against me, because I'm before you call me out on this, I have called myself out. So what next? Aside from this, I noticed that I started sharing a lot about myself to different people because I was scared of giving one person an exclusive access to me. That was my thought process at that particular time. My decision to be vulnerable at that time came from a place of fear, but it gradually evolved into me being self-aware. And I have seen myself grow, and I can tell you that now I embrace being vulnerable for the right reasons. I'm not using it anymore as a defense mechanism. I'm not here to sugarcoat vulnerability or to make us feel like being vulnerable is an easy task that doesn't have its own, bad side. No, I'm not here to say that. Even though as adults, the society makes us feel like, having this guard all up around us, being so closed up is a sign of maturity, and, vulnerability is a sign of weakness. I'm just here to say, like, it's okay for us to be vulnerable. I mean, it brings peace, it brings calm. It might have its own bad parts, but yeah, it comes with a lot of advantages. And this is what we'll be discussing on today's episode of the podcast. Now let's dive into the conversation of the day. Right before we dive in, let's hear what these amazing people think of the adulthood phase.
Adulthood is responsibility.
Adulthood is complicated.
Adulthood is growth.
Adulthood is maturity.
Adulthood is being independent.
Adulthood is stressful.
Adulthood has been confronting.
Adulthood is draining.
Adulthood is decision making.
Adulthood is resilient.
Adulthood is overwhelming.
Adulthood is fun and adventurous.
Remember, I'm not here to demonize this phase, but to say it as it is. Firstly, I think we should start this episode by defining vulnerability. What does it mean to be vulnerable? For a lot of people, they see vulnerability or being vulnerable as a weakness. Fear, they see it as a synonym for helplessness. But in reality, the ability or the art of being vulnerable actually shows courage, and it shows authenticity. Like, you're just able to be yourself without like trying to max up your feelings. You're just able to open up yourself, just bear it all. It's so nice and so relieving. It takes a lot of strength and courage for us to express our fears, to express our insecurities. So I think we should first scrap that whole idea of vulnerability is a sign of weakness. Seriously, it's not a sign of weakness in any way. I've met people that are afraid of being vulnerable, and for most people, they're afraid of being vulnerable because they're afraid of being hurt by somebody. They've been hurt in the past and they're just afraid of being hurt again. They're afraid of having their hearts broken. This fear is valid. It's a very valid one because it's not easy to heal from heartbreak. How much power do we actually want to give to this fear? If we think about it deeply, our inability to be vulnerable actually hinders us from experiencing wholesome or having wholesome relationships. Imagine having friends and you can't be free with them. You have to be somebody else around them. The essence of the relationship, in my opinion, is lost that way. For friendships, if you're not ready to share with your friends and they're not sharing with you, what are you guys doing? Career-wise, if you're not ready to embrace new things, go out of your way, try to look for constructive criticism, there's no way you're going to grow. Relationship-wise, if you're not able to bear it all with your partner, there's no way the relationship is going to work. Being vulnerable makes us human, really, because behind our strong personalities, there's always that flawed aspect of us. There's always that imperfect side, and being vulnerable just helps us embrace that part of us because we are not supposed to be perfect people. Being vulnerable helps us to understand that. It helps us to embrace ourselves as a whole. We often hear people say things like vulnerability is for kids. Adults are supposed to be matured. They're supposed to be strong. Some would even associate it with gender and say vulnerability is for women. It's a woman thing to be vulnerable. It's a woman thing to cry. Men don't cry, right? Men have emotions too. We are all humans. So being vulnerable is not limited to age or a defining factor for a particular gender. No, being vulnerable helps us to build genuine relationship. It helps us to build genuine connections with people. It helps us stay true to ourselves. It helps us have the safe space. It helps us have healthy relationships. Like, it's just so beautiful to be vulnerable, right? It gives us a sense of freedom. Like, it has just so many benefits. In as much as we have to be vulnerable, we need to be vulnerable to enjoy the wholesomeness of life, or, to be authentic to ourselves. We have to also remember that we cannot be vulnerable to everyone and anyone We have to be selective of the kind of people we let into our lives, of the kind of people we let into our space. And talking about that, you can't be 100% sure about anybody. You can feel you are letting the right person into your life, and the person turns out to be the bad person. But jokes on the person, really, not on you. Being vulnerable is not something that will come easy. It's not easy to start sharing your things. It's not easy to make people see that part of you that you keep so dearly to yourself. It doesn't come easy. And aside from knowing that being vulnerable doesn't come easy, you have to be prepared for heartbreaks. It will happen. You tell 100 people something, not 100 people will treat you the same way you treat them or see you the same way you see them. So we have to be ready for that. I mean, we have to just focus on the things we have control over and leave the things we do not have control over. You have control over the people you choose to tell things about you. You have control over the emotions you choose to express. You have control over being authentic with yourself. And you can do that. And you don't have control over how somebody else would choose to use the information you've shared with them. So I think we should actually focus less on the things we do not have control over and focus more on what we have control over. And, it will give us good results. So there was this time I listened to Oprah's Super Soul podcast where she invited this professor that has been researching on vulnerability. The name of the professor is Dr. Brené Brown. And towards the end of the podcast, she said, if you can't seek for help without self-judgment, it just simply means you always judge people when you help them. If you condemn yourself before even seeking for help, it shows that you condemn the people you choose to help. Yeah, it sounds complicated, but I think it's really relatable. Personally, I can relate, although I see myself as someone who is not afraid of being vulnerable. I will tell you that I do not like asking for help. Sometimes when I'm sharing my situations or my problems with friends, I put a disclaimer before sharing my things with them. I'm like, I'm telling you about this problem now, not because I want you to help me. I'm just telling you because I need someone to talk to and I just want you to listen to me. I find it really challenging asking for help. But we'll not be going into details on asking for help on this episode. On the next episode, we'll be discussing how we, me inclusive, can start asking for help without feeling scared, condemned, and judged. Well, can I be vulnerable with you all? During the course of the last week, I felt really sad because the numbers of the last episode of my podcast wasn't doing so well, and I've actually been trying to brainstorm ways in which I can, work on reaching out to more people, because the goal is having a community of like-minded people. So if you like the content of this video, kindly like, share, and subscribe, please. Well, that'll be all for this episode. On the next episode, we'll talk about art of seeking help. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening. Catch you on the next episode. Do not forget to live every moment and leave no room for regrets. Remember to follow this channel so you get notification whenever I drop a new episode. Thank you. Bye.